Modern driving conditions affect the way we drive, but in Malaysia, we score pretty good. 61% efficiency and 77% of the time, Malaysians are actually calm and behind the wheel. How do I know this? Well, because our friends at Shell Malaysia actually did a pretty cool research trying to figure out how do Malaysians feel and how do Malaysians behave when they're behind the wheel. And this is the kind of stuff that we found out. Shell Malaysia embarked on a journey to better understand the impact of modern driving conditions on motorists by engaging around 300 volunteers for 10 days between the 15th to the 25th of April 2017. In that time, different variables were tracked, such as amount of rest, types of food consumed, and daily socializing activities whilst driving, amongst others. This was done via active inputs via apps that were required to be downloaded into the smartphones of the respondents, as well as a fitness tracking wristband supplied. We spoke to the research analysts to understand what were the key takeaways. Tell us, there's a whole gamut of methods in gathering the information. So you've got a matrix of information for you to play around with. What could you say would be the key findings from this research?
Key findings, I think, for us this round in Malaysia were really interesting discoveries around the relationship between personality types and driver efficiency behind the wheel. So we very clearly, pinpointed, or there was a strong correlation for us in the outputs between altruistic and social types and high driver efficiency score behind the wheel. So by altruistic, we're talking about, people who, take others into consideration. They're very concerned about the well-being of those around them, potentially other motorists on the road, or the passengers in their car. So that can relate in a lot of different ways. And by sociable, we mean, quite talkative, slightly extroverted, those types. And we see a strong correlation there to high driver efficiency score, which was really interesting for us. Another key finding that came through was around, it gets into self-awareness for these individual drivers and using conscious relaxation techniques to combat stress. So recognizing, well, I'll run through a quick list of you because we saw a really strong variety of techniques that people use, especially behind the wheel, to combat stress. But what's interesting here is it requires a level of self-awareness to then take a moment back and actively make a change in your behavior on the fly. And we saw that come through with the Malaysian drivers that we worked with, which I think is actually really interesting, to see across a group of people. And some of the ways in which they're doing that is through a huge one was singing behind the wheel. So a lot of people who love to have a sing. Yeah, and then some breathing techniques, turning music on, simple things like rolling down the window in the car, or shifting the aircon or the heat or the temperature. So that was all quite interesting.
These behavioral changes actually has a direct link to the sorts of efficiency one can achieve behind the wheel. Rested, not rested, stressed, not stressed, music, no music, stuff like that.
Well, we would say from this study, what we gleaned was there's a lot of variation there. So while I can't say that one particular food group or a particular amount of fruit that you eat every day is predictive of a certain level of performance, we are seeing a variety of diets and approaches. And this is just one of the so many variables that we looked at across our driver population to compare against driver efficiency. That we see a really strong variety there, and it would be interesting to take this a step further to dive in with some follow-up around that.
Now, using all this information, I'm sure you were able to create profiles, actually snapshots of people and their behaviors and how those behaviors affected their driving styles. Give us an example of one. I'm sure you came across many.
So I would say that we found a couple of interesting drivers for us that stuck out as high performers. And one
Which
of
is
the
your favorite then?
yeah, I think one of the most interesting and dynamic of our participants, we've nicknamed her Super Mom, and she is a master behind the wheel. She's cool, calm, and collected. She's our kind of definition of a smooth and steady driver. She takes a little bit more time on the road. She sits through a little bit more traffic than than others, but she gets to her end. The end of her journey, in a smooth and steady fashion. What was interesting about her too is she practiced really positive lifestyle habits as well. Healthy diet, regular exercise, staying hydrated. She always keeps water in her car. She keeps healthy snacks stocked in her car as well, and uses that time of isolation to link to healthy nutrition habits, which is quite interesting.
Me time in the car.
Yeah, and she really embodied that. Quite interesting.